September has historically on YouTube been Shakespeare September. This year it's going to be hosted by Kelly, Jason and Nicole, and I'll link to all of their channels and announcement videos down below. I've been eyeing Shaketember for a couple of years now, but honestly I'm just not really a big reader of plays, poetry, sonnets. It just doesn't really appeal to me. And while I have read a couple of Shakespeare plays, those were back in high school for required reading, and I really don't feel a massive need to either revisit those or explore more. However, I do love some of the ideas behind Shakespeare's stories. I love some of the tropes that come up and the vibe. The hosts have been pretty clear that for Shaketember you don't actually need to read any Shakespeare. You can if you want, and they have lots of read-alongs happening throughout the month to encourage you to explore different plays, different sonnets. But retellings and watching film adaptations also totally count, and that is where my level of Shakespeare interest kinda hits. So in this vlog, my goal is going to be to tackle 2 Shakespeare retellings and possibly see what film adaptations or live plays I can get my hands on. The first of the retellings has been on my TBR for years, quite possibly, and that is Bright Smoke, Cold Fire by Rosamund Hodge. I've read Rosamund Hodge's books in the past. I read both Crimson Bound and Cruel Beauty, which were fairy tale retellings instead of Shakespeare, but I do know that Hodge has form in the genre, so I'm quietly confident that I'm going to enjoy this one. Her writing tends towards being quite slow, quite flowery, lush gothic vibes, and that's really, I think, what I'm looking for in September. From the summary, this one is a true retelling or reimagining. We are taking the bare bones of Romeo and Juliet in transplanting it into a completely different story. It is a young adult fantasy set in a vaguely dystopian world that has zombies running about in it. Second retelling is a little bit more, I guess, of an alternate reality continuation, and it sounds like where Bright Smoke is going to be quite serious, quite lush, quite dark, this is going to be quite fun, fast-paced and rompy. This is Benvolio and Mercutio Turn Back Time by Elle, Beaumont and Wilham. In this one, we come into the story just as everything is kicking off between the Montagues and the Capulets, and an older version of Mercutio appears with a time machine. This has been pitched as being really perfect for fans of Cat Sebastian, Alexis Hall, and KJ Charles. So I am really stoked because I should absolutely love this one. I think I'm going to start with Bright Smoke, Cold Fire, and I'll check back in with you once I have something to share. I'm at chapter 10 of Bright Smoke, Cold Fire, and I think that is round about maybe the quarter mark. It's like around page 116 of 400 and something. So the characters are fairly well established. I feel like we've just kind of had that, the big inciting incidents. The 2 sets of duos are kind of both on their paths. We kind of really set up what each storyline is going to be about. So I feel like this is a good point to just jump in with this update. This book is not what I thought it would be. We're following 4 main characters. We have Romeo and Paris in one plotline, and Juliet and Runaho, who I think is what we would consider to be Rosamund, in the other plotline. The world we've set up is that the Juliet is almost a religious figure. The world is in chaos, as we've said. There's this kind of plague outside the walls of the city that is gradually and inevitably coming in. The Juliet is assigned a protector who has the power to control her and make sure she makes the sacrifices she's supposed to. That has been Tybalt, but with his murder, Paris is now set up to take that role. However, in secret, Juliet and Romeo marry, and Romeo actually becomes that role too. Then Juliet dies off screen. Paris and Romeo instead kind of forge this connection to each other. They are both able to hear each other's thoughts. They're both able to control the other. They now together are going off kind of to find out partly what happened to Juliet from Paris's point of view, but also to avenge her because they both clearly love her in their own ways. Romeo is like the priestess of one of these death goddesses. It is her job to usher spirits, but she's very rebellious. She doesn't just follow what the priestesses say. She wants to explore this forbidden library so that she can hopefully actually find a solution to save their city rather than just preventing and delaying the inevitable. While she is undertaking a kind of initiation trial, ushering these spirits into the underworld, she meets Juliet, who doesn't seem like the other spirits. And again, they accidentally forge a connection, and Runaho drags Juliet back into the world of the living with her. My biggest kind of contention with this book at the moment so far has been that Rosamund Hodge clearly did a lot of world building on it. She clearly put a lot of thought into the world that she was creating. And I feel that that is coming through a lot more than any kind of connection to the characters. I feel like we have spent this quarter setting up the world, setting up the magic, setting up the kind of the challenges that the characters are going on without ever actually telling me more than the snippet of what these characters are. I don't know anything about who Juliet or Romeo or Rosamund are as people. Rosamund, I guess we know a little bit about. We know that she's watched her parents die. She's very self-sacrificing, and she's very kind of rebellious within her priestess order. Paris, again, we have a little bit about. We know that he has been a disappointment to his father. He's still very much looked down upon by his father. But I'm hoping that now that the kind of the setup is there, we're gonna maybe kick off a little bit more personality, a little bit more of a connection to those characters. However, I did start this as an audiobook, so I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch to reading this physical copy and see if that changes my kind of connection to it or my thoughts on it. And we'll see how it goes. I am finished with Bright Smoke, Cold Fire, and let me just tell you, this one was a struggle. Partly, I'm going to confess right up front, I have had a really busy, really stressful week at work, and there's maybe a decent chance that if I'd went into this book another week, maybe I would have a different experience with it. But I do also think that it had some kind of genuine issues that aren't my problem. So we'll go through them. First of all, I was so excited to read this one. It has been, I will admit, on my shelves for a really long time. I think this was with me in my last move, which means we're talking about at least 5 or 6 years. It came out in 2016, and honestly, I wouldn't be terribly surprised if I had picked it up relatively soon after publication. I had enjoyed Cruel Beauty and Crimson Bound so much that I suspect I probably picked this one up relatively close to seeing it in stores. It does have a couple of things in common with Crimson Bound and specifically Cruel Beauty, which I really, really loved. And I think the things it has in common with those books are its strengths, and they're the best things about it. Rosamund Hodge seems to do these quite dark heroines who are driven, who have their own goals, their own motivations, and go about them unapologetically. And I definitely thought we got some of that coming through in Runaho, and it maybe to a lesser extent because we see far less of her in the character of the Juliet. In the part of the story kind of taking off from where I left you last time, we have Runaho and the Juliet working together to solve a murder in the cloister so that Runaho can go on and investigate this mysterious library more. She's looking for a way to save the city, and the Juliet is looking for a way to figure out what has happened to her in this not quite dead, not quite alive situation. Then we're following Paris and Romeo, who are currently wandering about the city, looking for more information about what Tybalt was up to, looking for more information on the Capulets clan and what is going on with their plans for the city. In terms of character, I definitely preferred our girls to the boys. I think Romeo is always a little bit, in every adaptation I've ever read or seen, Romeo is always a bit of a wet blanket, and Paris either becomes the villain or relatively indifferent. And I think that was true in this. They both felt a little bit nothing, whereas the girls definitely felt like they had more drive, more ambition. They felt more complicated as characters. The main problem this book had, though, is that it is just too convoluted. There's too much going on. I feel like there's probably too many main characters happening. We have the 4 of them, and I just don't feel that there's enough time to give any of them particularly in-depth personalities or to make you feel particularly attached to any of them in particular. If I had to pick a favourite, it would be Runaho, but I think that might be because in the earliest chapters, her plotline feels quite separate from the other three, and that maybe gave her more of a distinct feeling in my head. Rosamund Hodge's writing is consistently beautiful, and I think that's one of the things that was my favorite thing about her other books. It's something that made me pick this up. It's one of the things I always think of when I think of her writing, is that it was very plush, luxurious writing, very beautiful writing, and something that I can definitely see maybe being considered purple prose by different readers. Although there were moments in this one where that really beautiful descriptive writing came through, it didn't happen that often, and I think that was maybe because the book was just so bogged down with its world building and its plot. Honestly, I really just thought maybe, I don't know whether an editor could have came in here and whether we could have streamlined things, whether we needed to maybe go the other way and actually sit down and give more explanations of things as they happened. But this one just, for the first half of the book, I was consistently lost. I consistently felt like I was just getting way too much information, too many names, too many characters, and not really being told enough about what was happening. I just felt like I was scrambling for purchase on the story. And even as we got a little bit further into the book, it never really overcame that feeling because the characterization had been so lacking in the first half that even as the plot started to come together in the second half, I just didn't care enough about the characters. This is the first in a duology. There is a sequel. It obviously has been out for a long time by now. The cover for the sequel actually has all four of the main characters on it, whereas this one I think shows us the Juliet, and maybe one of these might be Runaho, but the sequel shows us all four characters. Maybe that bodes well, that the characters get more fleshed out and become more prevalent, but I think the cover of this one says a lot about the problems I had with the book. It was very much all flash, all vibes, all aesthetic, without actually having enough substance to back it up. So, unfortunately, with all my maybe too high expectations of Rosamund Hodge, I won't be continuing with the duology. This book is going to go in my unhaul pile, sadly. But I do have her more recent book still on my TBR shelf, so I'm really hoping that that's going to redeem something for me. As I said, it's been a really, really crazy week at work, and I haven't done as much reading as I would like. But I am planning on watching the Baz Luhrmann Romeo and Juliet adaptation tonight because that is the best Romeo and Juliet adaptation. I will take other recommendations on that, but I think it's a hard one to beat. I'm going to start Benvolio and Mercutio, I think that's the order. Benvolio and Mercutio, Turn Back Time, tomorrow, and I will let you know how that goes. So I didn't update you on Benvolio Mercutio, but I have finished it, so we'll just talk about it now. I did have some problems with this one too. And I don't know. I don't think that my being really busy this week has made me judge the books more harshly. But I do think it's funny that both these books I have struggled with. Mercutio, Benvolio and Mercutio, I enjoyed far more. I think part of that is that this is quite a kind of it's quite a rompy romance time travel story. It does what it says on the tin with that because it doesn't take itself too seriously. The things that bothered me didn't bother me as much as they would have if it was a more serious fantasy novel. Funnily enough, the biggest problem I have with this book is kind of similar to what I had with Bright Smoke, in that there's a lot going on. In this one, there are so many aspects to it that it feels like the author just took every single thing they liked in a book and shoved it in. And some things are only mentioned very, very briefly. So they felt very much like a plot contrivance to solve a problem. And the body of the story is in Verona, but instead of in Shakespeare's time, this is in 1901, and it's a very steampunky type of Verona. Right at the start of our novel, we have older Benvolio, a Benvolio who is in his 40s. He has spent his life after Mercutio's death in Romeo and Juliet trying to find a way to go back and bring back his best friend. And to do that, he builds a time machine. He comes back and he gifts Mercutio the time machine, tells him that he's going to die in 3 days, and explains that they can use this time machine to get away or to jump back, whatever they want. Benvolio and Mercutio go off for the first half of the novel on a series of kind of time travel jump adventures. They go to somewhere around the 2000 mark and get a kind of Shakespeare in the Park type tour. And then they jump way ahead to a kind of Tron type future where they are racing light bikes. But it's very much unrelated to the main part of the story. It's just little adventures. And what these moments do is give the characters time to get to know each other outside of their everyday lives. This is where most of the romance building happens. This is where we see them in the dual POVs, their attraction to each other, their love for each other. Then round about the midpoint of the book, they come back and they really settle down into deciding that they have to solve this problem. They have to figure out a way to get everyone they care about. So Mercutio, Romeo, Paris, Tybalt, Lady Capulet, all the characters that die in Romeo and Juliet, they want to find a solution to this problem. They're told by older Benvolio at this point that they have maybe 5 or 6 jumps that they can make in the time machine before they start to tear up the fabric of reality. So there's a constraint there that we have to do in a certain amount of time. And this to me feels like what the bulk of the book should have been. This to me feels like where the real interest is, and I think the jumping through time little adventures should have been a lot smaller, or maybe you could have had an occasional glitch of that happening in the main solving Romeo and Juliet jumps. But it made the book feel quite disconnected, whereas I felt like this is really where the story starts. And so they keep going back, a very Groundhog Day type of thing, and trying different things. They stop Romeo speaking to Juliet at the party, they stop him going to the party entirely. And a couple of them are where I feel that there was too much going on. We have one attempt where they apparently, in this universe, you can summon demons. We were told very, very briefly right at the start when the time machine was built that a demon was involved to get the magic to make the time machine work. But honestly, that was such a brief sentence that I genuinely forgot about the demons being an aspect until maybe around the 70% mark when they decided to summon one. It felt like there had been no real paranormal aspect in this book until that. They summon a demon, they make a deal with him to get him to do something, which I won't spoil, but it doesn't work. And then they think, oh, well, demons are inherently trying to do the wrong thing. What we want is someone that isn't out to fuck us over. So they then decide to summon a fae. And again, they make a deal with the fae that goes wrong. And again, the fae are brought up for that moment and then never heard from again. One of them removes one character from this attempt, and the other deal removes a different character from that timeline attempt. And you could have just found other ways without using demons and fae to make those 2 attempts work. Similarly, in terms of the world building, with the too much going on aspect. I feel like the world building for the time travel was very loosey goosey. It was a lot of hand waving. You could have just told me he built a time machine and I would have went with it. So there was a little bit of that too much happening, over explaining, which just made the world building feel a bit shaky. Whereas, see, if you just confidently told me he built a time machine, I would have been fine. The real strength of this, though, was the characters. We have obviously Benvolio and Mercutio are the stars. They are great. I really enjoyed watching them. I really enjoyed their friendship. They have a pet pig and a pet duck, and it was just the cutest thing ever. And I really enjoyed their characters. I really liked getting to see them interact with Romeo in different ways. And I really liked that the authors gave us a couple of different variations that not explain Romeo and Juliet, because obviously it doesn't need explained. But nowadays we do look at it and be like, oh my god, they're children. They've known each other a day and catastrophe arises from it. Why don't you just solve that somehow? Why not try something new? And I like that those authors did. They gave a slightly different explanation for Romeo and Juliet's sudden interest in each other. They gave a slightly different angle on Romeo's very kind of capricious love, the way he flits from Rosalind to Juliet. They give little explanations that just made the characters feel more rounded to a kind of modern reader. And I like that. It's not going to be a 5-star for me. I think it's maybe somewhere in a 3.5, but I did enjoy it and I definitely thought it was an improvement on Bright Smoke. So in terms of my reading week, things are getting better. I am hoping that next week at work is going to go back to normal and I will be able to enjoy what I have planned to read more fully. I'm really hoping that this isn't the start of a reading slump, because both these books felt like a little bit more work than they should have for the length and what they are, because I have a lot of books that I want to get to for Magical Readathon, and as we go into October for spooky season, I am signed up to Halloweenathon. I have a few of my own kind of TBR picking ideas, and I'm sure there are going to be dozens of other October readathons that I'm going to want to take part in by the time we get to October. So I really want to be in my kind of peak reading era for that month. I hope you've enjoyed this vlog. I hope there has been something of interest to you. Let me know your favourite Shakespeare retellings in the comments. I think my favourite is probably Still Star-Crossed by Melinda Tope, but I am sure there are lots of books that are actually Shakespeare retellings that I've just never cottoned onto, so I would love to hear your favourites. If you have enjoyed the video, I really appreciate if you could like it. I'd love if you subscribe to the channel to see what I read next. And if you don't have anything particular you want to say, but you do want to leave a comment, then just leave me a pen emoji down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.